This is the first video for the 7.1a lesson, which is called Introduction to Functions. Um, we've hopefully did the best you could, and for the most part, it was hopefully pretty easy in completing the first about 7 slides to where you got to a map that looked like this. I'm going to kind of just recap some things from those slides and talk about a couple things. First of all, a map, as you read through this, basically is a table. You have an X column, a Y column, an input column, which would be X's, an output column, which would be Y's. And you have arrows. And notice the arrows are always pointing towards the Y. That's important. They're not double-sided arrows. They always just have a line and an arrow like this. And we'll see some other variations of this. So they're not always maybe this basic, but this is a map, just another way to kind of collect information. So we now have a table, a graph, an equation, maybe a context, maybe a map, as well as maybe just a list of ordered pairs. And I'm going to click back to kind of the non-Desmos version, just because it's a little easier for me to scroll. You should have gotten a graph that looks something like this. You hopefully came to the conclusion that it was discrete because you can't insert part of a quarter, although I guess you could, but you can't get part of a ball. And at some point, you can't break a quarter into anything smaller than a penny. So we had a discrete graph. It happened to be linear and proportional. But before we say that, since this example was a function that I guess all lines or proportional lines are functions, this is only our first example. So I promise you this module is not about lines again. It does have some lines, and it's not about proportional again. But this first example is a linear proportional relationship. So it was pretty easy, and it had an equation y equals 3x. So the nice thing about this module, we'll have some built-in review, but it does have the majority of this module is new content. And so as we look at the next example, or you try the next example, then we'll start to fine tune what is a function. Right now, you just are going to see some examples of things that are and aren't, but just be careful not to jump to a conclusion that, like, for example, a misconception is, well, if it's a line, it's a function, and that's the test of whether something is mathematically a function. And I would hold off on stating that till we look at maybe 3 or 4 examples, and then we'll try to clarify the definition of this thing called a function. Hopefully, for the most part, the other questions made sense. You might also want to write down, as you can tell, there will be some vocabulary in this module. So if there is some vocab that seems important to you that you might lose track of, writing that down next to any work that you're doing for the 7.1a lesson.